Good afternoon to all the participants, our faculty members of Syamaprasad College, our Vice Principal Dr. Shushmita Mukherjee ma'am, our ICC convener Dr. Nivedita Bhattacharya ma'am, speakers and students. On behalf of Syamaprasad College, I welcome all of you to this webinar on feminism and gender sensitization in India, issues and challenges, organized by the Department of History in collaboration with ICC of Syamaprasad College. I am really thankful to our esteemed resource persons who have agreed to share their findings on this particular topic of the webinar. And I welcome our Honorable Chairperson, Dr. Korobi Mitra ma'am, who has encouraged us from the beginning. We are looking forward to this immense, enriching afternoon with all of you. Now, I request our Vice Principal and HOD History, Dr. Shushmita Mukherjee ma'am, to take over.
Thank you, Shulagna. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to everyone. I express my deep gratitude to Korobi Mitra, Associate Professor, Department of History, Vijay Krishna Girls College, for accepting my invite of a two-day state-level seminar or webinar, as we may say, on feminism and gender, sensitization in India, issues and challenges. She has very kindly agreed to introduce the topic and chair the technical session and give her observation on the 5 papers to be presented by teachers of different colleges on different issues. We are actually having a 2-day seminar. Today, on the first day, we have invited papers from teachers of different colleges from Calcutta. And tomorrow, we have given the platform to the young researchers who will place their findings on this webinar tomorrow. The topic is extremely relevant and extremely important, and Dr. Korobi Mitra will illuminate us on that. But just to say a very few words, I would just say that this was a concept we find from the Western women, that no feminist works emerge from behind the Hindu parda or out of the Muslim harems. Centuries of slavery do not provide a fertile soil for intellectual development or expression. This was the idea of Miriam Schreiner in her introduction to a book called Feminism, the Essential Historical Writings. But I would say that feminism did exist in India. Indian women, they wrote, they spoke on women's condition, they formed organizations to secure the desired change, and definitely had an impact. And it may not be on the Western model. Perhaps they did not follow the Western model because we were a colonial country and Western model was different, but they did contribute notable reforms in the area of suffrage, education, legislation, and civil rights. And I would say that Indian feminism did emerge from behind the curtain, but within the and challenges there. It is still continuing, it's a continuing legacy-patriarchal society. Today, we are very happy that 5 paper presenters are here with us, and on behalf of Syamaprasad College, I extend a very warm welcome to them. They will talk on diverse topics, and I'm sure that we will be enriched by it. Now, the speakers today, Riddhi Bhattacharya, Assistant Professor, History, Scottish Church College; Varvi Roy, Assistant Professor, Philosophy, Scottish Church College; Anirban Go Thakurta, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Srirampur College; Chandramoli Das, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, Khidirpur College; Tina Das, Jivantala Rokeya Mahavidyalaya, Assistant Professor, Department of History. I thank my History Department, without whose unconditional support this 2-day-long webinar would not have been possible. Convener ICC, Acharya, Department of Shulagna Shom, and the technical support team consisting of Shulagna, Michun Gayan, and Damini Roy. I now take the pleasure of introducing Chairperson, Dr. Korobi Mitra. She needs no introduction, I know, but still it's a formality for me. She's an Associate Professor, Department of History of Bijoy Krishna Girls College. She has written two monographs, Maratha Saga in Bengal, A Colonial Experience, Dokhin Purbo Asia and Dokhin Purbo Asia Itihas. She is the coordinator of Women's Study Center, Bijoy Krishna Girls College, and co-editor of 2005 conference proceedings and compilation of research articles. She completed her UGC-sponsored minor research project in 2004. She has attended and presented papers in various national and international seminars. And also she has contributed innumerable articles in various books and journals. She has received two Best Paper Awards, one at a national and another at international webinar. Welcome, Dr. Mitro. I hand over the proceedings to you.
Thank you so much, Shushmita. I am audible? I am audible? So, good afternoon. In the beginning, I feel myself honored for being invited to chair the Research Scholars session. To me, this is a valuable opportunity to listen to the papers and articulation of new thoughts from young scholars. You all are my hope, our hope, to better say. So therefore, my heartfelt thanks are for Professor Sushmita Mukherjee, who is my old friend, and other dignitaries of Syamaprasad Mukherjee College. So today we are going to discuss feminism and gender sensitization in India, issues and challenges. Feminism, all of we know, is a set of movements aimed at defining and establishing and defending equal political and economic rights for women. In other words, it is the pursuit of women's rights within any socio-economic space. Like their feminist counterparts all over the world, the feminists of India seek greater equality, the right to work for equal wages, the right to equal access to health and education, equal political rights, and so on. Indian feminists also have fought against culture-specific issues within Indian patriarchal society. Ancient Indian tradition upheld the worship of the mother goddess, and a school of thought promotes the idea of a glorious past of Indian women. However, the deep insight negates the theory and proves the presence of gender discrimination in all ages. In the post-independence period, Indian women are protected by several laws, bylaws, etc. I am just referring to some of them. All of we know since still then I will refer to all these. Women's rights in Indian Constitution are right to equality, no discrimination by the state, equality of opportunity, equal remuneration for equal work, the right to dignity and decency, right against workplace harassment, right against domestic violence, right to keep their identity anonymous on the part of female sexual assault victims, right to get free legal aid, right not to be arrested at night, right to register virtual complaints, right against indecent representation, right against being stalked, right to zero FIR, and right of children to free and compulsory education. These are the constitutional weapons to protect the women from gender discrimination. The laws are complemented by a number of governmental pro-women empowerment projects. Now we'll focus on the next part of the discussion, namely the issue of gender sensitization. The connotation of the word gender is well known, and according to Kamla Bhasin, it points to the social process of learning whereby norms and expectations inclusive of dress codes attitudes, opportunities, rights, mobility, freedom of expression, priorities, and even dreams are determined by the society on the basis of one's view, one's sex. It varies from society to society and can be changed. It presides over gender sensitivity as well as the modification of behavior by raising awareness of gender equality. The root cause of gender discrimination is the patriarchal mindset prevalent in Indian society. So, how to cope with it? There is no such easy formula or generalized views. Still, then, we may try to discuss. This mindset is to some extent changing. It can be achieved by conducting various sensitization campaigns, training centers, workshop programs, etc. The theme may be defined as the awareness to behave in a manner which is sensitive to gender justice and gender equality issues. The NCERT has developed syllabus and textbooks across the subjects to promote gender sensitization in the school curriculum. The school education prioritizes gender sensitization in designing of activities. CBSE has also prepared guidelines for gender sensitivity in textbooks and textual materials. It is interlinked to gender empowerment. It encourages people to reassess their attitude towards the other gender. Still, then, there are some hard factual realities. Uh, they present an opposite scenario. Family customs, religious tradition, and cultural mindset act as stumbling block in the way of complete implementation of the laws. In this way, we cannot explain why, despite the lifting of ban on entering Shabarimala shrine on the part of women between the age of 10 to 50, sorry, by the Supreme Court on 28 September 2018, the issue haunts still now. Despite ban on female feticide, the female to male ratio is 933 to 1000. Childbearing and raising children are considered the only important duty of a married lady who is very often married before attaining 18 years of age, and that child should be a male offspring. Her domestic works are never valued. The data from the National Crime Records Bureau recorded the rise of domestic violence of all types, though it goes without say that many cases are suppressed. According to the key economic indicators of India, dated 29th August 2020, average daily wage of general male agricultural laborer is rupees 293.11, while the female agricultural laborer gets rupees 229.25. Women participation in parliament is 14.5% only. Despite large number of governmental projects for women, the rate of education is 65.5% compared to the world average of 79.7%. According to Economic Survey 2020, 60% of women do housework, or in other words, 91% daily unpaid work are done by them. Only 27.2% women participate as the formal labor force. It is estimated that Indian economy could grow by an additional 60% by 2025, adding $2.9 trillion if women were represented in the formal economy at the same rate as men. If all this data point to the pre-pandemic situation, so it is quite understandable what is going on now. Data does not always reflect actual situation, especially regarding the women, because as a cultural norm, average Indian women are trained up since childhood to remain silent. Therefore, innumerable personal deprivations remain unshared. We experience the increasing rate of anemia, malnutrition, early pregnancy, school dropouts, unlimited work time, deprivation of paternal property, motivational projection in media and entertainment, absence of control over body and private space for them. Even the so called ladies' magazines devote their pages mostly for gender stereotype topics. The list may be unlimited. So, is there any way out for us? Only enactments cannot change the situation. Wholehearted effort on the part of the NGOs, SHGs, private companies, ensuring access to decent work for women with parity of pay, skill enhancing programs, financial and technical literacy, and above all, change in cultural tradition on gender role may bring a better future. From my own observation, it may be debated. Still, then, I would argue that apart from sporadic cases, nowadays at least unmarried women more or less are allowed to go outside their home premises, use mobile phones, can articulate their expressions more freely compared to 50 years back. I am 57 years old, so I can say this. Unfortunately, they have become more prone to allurements and averse to learn bookish or vocational knowledge. In an age of internet, the world is open to them. Save a small percentage. What are they doing? Paradoxically, many of them support gender discrimination and strengthen the patriarchal gender stereotypes. This mindset is also responsible for their backwardness. It may be expected that their determination to wipe out gender discrimination and active participation in the development projects may change the situation to certain extent. Above all, if they can overcome the fear of an unknown entity and develop strong personality, they may be relieved of the pain of gender discrimination. Today's papers focus on gender discrimination from different angles. Let us listen to the young researchers. The discussion will follow after the presentation. Thank you. Best of luck to all of you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for enlightening us with your excellent observation on today's topic. You have highlighted different judiciary rights of women, gender inequality with statistics, and other issues that we have witnessed for ages, which is slowly changing now. Now, this is the time for the technical session. It is an immense pleasure to have wonderful speakers like all of you together. I would like to introduce our first eminent speaker, Dr. Riddhi Bhattacharya ma'am, Assistant Professor and HOD, History, Scottish Church College. The title of her paper is From Meher-un-Nisa to Nur Jahan, The Politics of Gender at the Mughal Court and Harem. Ma'am, over to you. Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, Honorable Vice Principal, Dr. Shushmita Mukherjee, Convener, Dr. Nivedita Bhattacharya, Chairperson, Dr. Korobi Mitro, and our moderator, Srimati Shulabna Shon, who happens to be a very dear former student of mine, my colleagues from different institutions, other fellow speakers, other respected guests, and dear students. I thank the Department of History and ICC Syamaprasad College for organizing this two-day state-level webinar on feminism and gender sensitization in India, issues and challenges. At a time when a relook on feminism movement in India, it is the need of the hour. And I thank them for giving me the opportunity to speak on this webinar. So before I start, let me share my presentation with you. I hope you can see the screen.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. We can see the presentation.
Yes. Without further ado, let me introduce my topic. From Meher-un-Nisa to Nur Jahan, the politics of gender at the Mughal court and harem. Now, today in the morning, I got a WhatsApp forward from a very dear colleague, this one, okay, from the very famous social media page called the handler called the Mad Mughal Meme. I'm sure many of you have seen this, how a guileless Emperor Jahangir is made into an opium addict by his beautiful, cunning, and scheming wife Noor Jahan. This narrative is the most prevalent narrative on Noor Jahan. How a woman's talent, intelligence, all are reduced to being a seductress, how she's reduced as a seductress, and how tragic that still today, this is the narrative we are most comfortable with. And in seeing this played out every day nowadays through the idiot box. Now, before I get too carried away, let me come back to my narrative. Now, many of us have heard this story in various books and comics like Amar, Chitra, Katha and all, that how on a freezing cold night of 1577 in a Persian aristocratic family who were fleeing Persia to come to India, a refugee girl is born just outside Kandahar in a shabby tent, and how the once rich parents, that is Giyas Beg and Asmat Beg, are forced to abandon her, as already they have 2 sons and a daughter in a village, as they had no means to raise her. After a few hours, when the parents come back to their senses, they realize that they have abandoned their child. The father rushes to rescue her, only to find her shielded by a hooded serpent. It is then that they named her Meherun-Nisa, the Sun Woman. And it is from then onwards that legends, fiction, myths, and histories are created over her. Let me pause here to delve into something else, which is the dominant meta-narrative about the Mughal women in the narrative is that they lacked agency, they were passive recipient of patriarchal exploitation, their lives confined to an space of the Oriental harem. The most frequent portrayal of this harem, as it was consumed eagerly by a curious audience in Europe that was beginning to be fascinated by an exotic East, was that of a cruel and endlessly lascivious emperor surrounded by thousands of mobile young women competing for his attention and spinning away in sexual frustration. Now, not only was this image eagerly adopted by Western audiences, it also trickled down into the Indian consciousness through colonial experience and the European narrative of Indian history. Thus, to this day, there is a perception that Mughal women operated within a fixed zone of influence, the domestic harem, which is an immutable cloister space in which they led restricted and unfulfilled lives, from which they could seldom escape and to which the emperor had access. But in reality, this picture is not so unidimensional. In fact, the harem, or the zenana as it was called, was an industrially carefully calibrated and orchestrated world. The wanton world of the Europeans' imagination, in which women ruthlessly schemed against one another and wasted the hours of their days in frustrated languor, was just that of a fantasy. The janana, instead of the janana itself is busy, well-ordered place where each woman knew her place and her worth. So it is a place where accomplished, educated women were prized, well-spoken, and the cultured women could most likely advance in the sphere. But no doubt there were intrigues and jealousies, certainly, for how would there not be when hundreds or even thousands of people lived together. But overwhelming nature of the janana was one of warm support and companionship, a complex, nuanced world of female complicity and understanding, one in which excellence was valued and women learned all the skills required to run a city from there, as there were no men were allowed within the janana. Now,
Ma'am,
yes,
for interrupting, আপনার স্লাইড বোধহয় একটা জায়গাতেই রয়েছে, চেঞ্জ
আমি
হয়নি।
একটাতে না, আমি চেঞ্জ করিনি।
ওকে
ওকে
ওকে ওকে হুম হুম
Yes. So so no man was allowed in the janana, and many Mughal ladies like Khanzada Begum, Hamida Banu Begum, Gulbadan Begum, Noor Jahan, Mumtaz Mahal, Jahanara, and Roshanara Begum, and Zebunnisa Begum, they have all challenged this narrative on Mughal women, as throughout their lives they took decisions that were taken from power that often resulted uh, as their act as the Padsha Begum or the First Lady. And they displayed their power not only in the Mughal harem but also in the Mughal polity. So this representation of the Mughal harem should be kept in mind whenever we are dealing with any women, any Mughal woman. Now, for that matter, the story of Noor Jahan is more or less either she is this seductress, this cunning woman who uses her sexual prowess to seduce the poor Jahangir, who was always opium addicted, or uh, her love story, the romantic angle that we know through many legends are being immortalized. No, I'm not against romance. I'm definitely not say that there's nothing like that. Of course, the romance is a very big part of the narrative, but it is at times overrated, trivializing her achievements. So coming back to Mehrun Nisa, her parents, Giyas and Asmat Beg, were educated and cultured, and they were filled with Persian tehzeeb. And very soon, Giyas wins a modest mansab of 300 horses at Akbar's court at Fatehpur Sikri, which already counts numerous other Persian immigrants at attendance. So at 7, Mehrun Nisa is given in marriage to Ali Kuli, a Persian mercenary who obtains some measures of fame as an excellent shot at the court of Salim Mirza, the future Jahangir, and is given the title of Sher Afghan, or killer of tigers. Now, Mehrun Nisa learns how to hunt and to shoot with her husband, and later she gives birth to a daughter named Ladli in the year 1605. So, according to historians like Ruby Lal, she got a first-hand experience of administration in Bengal, where her husband was posted, and she stayed there for 12 years. As her husband was a middle-ranking officer, who was always like away from his mansab. So Mehrun Nisa had to do a lot of other works, and she knew about the art of negotiation that goes around in the Mughal system of administration. In 1608, at the age of 30, Meher is widowed. Her husband is assassinated, and many say that it is at the behest of Salim, that is Jahangir. And Meher and Ladli are taken into the household of the Mughal court, where Jahangir, who is now the Padshah or the emperor, she is placed under the matriarch Rokaya Begum, a senior-most surviving widow, a childless woman to whom she is a cherished companion. It is under Rokaya that she learns the workings of the harem politics. She designs dresses. Then she, which famously nowadays, there's a couture line called the Noor Jahan line. So her dresses were very popular at that time, mostly her wedding dresses that she designed. Then she learned jewelry designing and other crafts, and soon she raises above many in the imperial Janana. Now, in 1611, during the Nowruz festival, where the Padshah receives fabulous gifts from his ministers who outdo each other for his salamti, that the romantic angle of the story of the rise of Noor Jahan starts. In the Janana, always during the time of festivals, Meena Bazaars are created. So in the Nowruz festival of 1611, again, a Meena Bazaar is created where royal ladies, wives, and daughters of ministers dresses up. They are unveiled and they exhibit curios and other goods to the Padshah, who act as customer. And generally they haggle and flirt with the ladies over prices. So it's a time of freedom, gregarious joy for the women who are generally, who are permitted to such boisterous fun as they are away from the gaze of any man, but only the Padshah. It is in this Meena Bazaar of 1611 that Jahangir, who's a man of 42 years at this time, sees Mehrun Nisa, a widow of 33, 34 years old. Now, there is this famous kabutar story that how she was holding, dressed in white, she was holding she was waiting for somebody, maybe for Begum Rokhaya, when seeing her exceptional beauty, Jahangir places two beautiful pigeons on her hand, said, please hold on, there's a mud in my dress, let me wipe it out. So while he was doing that, he turned towards her and she said, okay, you have only one pigeon, where is the other pigeon gone? And she said that it is gone, it is flown away. And he says, how? And then she lets loose of another hand, and the second pigeon also flies away. And she says, essay. So this is how not only the Jahangir is losing his pigeon, but he's losing his heart as well. He's in love with Noor Jahan, and the story is exceptionally. The story is well understood. The story is exceptional in their own right, and this is celebrated romance. So Jahangir must have known her, like her father, Mehrunisa's father, Giyas Beg, was promoted as the wazir, and he had been given the title of Itmad-ud-daulah, and her brother Asaf Khan Beg they were already valued members of Jahangir's entourage. So the circumstances of her family and her widowhood were definitely known to the emperor. Now, speaking to her, Jahangir is so seduced by her beauty, grace, and charm. And within 2 months, they got married. And Jahangir then gives her the title of Noor Mahal, Light of the Palace, in mirroring his own name, that is Nur-ud-din Jahangir, that is Light of the Faith. Now, Noor Mahal was Jahangir's 20th and last wife. And by 1616, she became Noor Jahan, that is Light of the World. They never had any children together. Their conjugal life was for 16 years. And in Noor Jahan, Jahangir finds a blend of comforting, reassuring care and a woman with enormous talent, charisma, ability. So Noor Jahan shares Jahangir's aesthetic sense and contributes in many ways to the expansion of his imperial vision and legacy. So within a few years, Noor Jahan is issuing royal farmans, signing with her own seal, having gold and silver coins struck in her name. To give you an example, just look at the slide. Engaging in trade and has a series of magnificent buildings constructed through the breadth of the empire. So exceptionally for a woman, something exceptional happened during her time, that drums were beaten before her advance, and she was the first and only Mughal woman to sit in the balcony of her palace, that is the Jharokha, along with her husband, while nobles presented themselves and listened to her diktats. So she was actually Jahangir's co-sovereign, a power Jahangir willingly shared with her, and he had complete trust in her. And so she issued edicts or farmans, again something that no Mughal woman ever achieved, except for the khutbah, the two other signs of Islamic sovereignty, that is issuing coins that bore her name along with Jahangir, and issuing farmans were vested in her. So her father and brother, whom she trusted, helped her with the administration. That has led many historians like Beni Prasad to call her out as the head of a junta that she composed, comprising her father, brother, and Prince Khurram, or later Shah Jahan, with whom she married off her niece Arjumand, who later came to be known as the Mumtaz Mahal. So both Shah Jahan, both Khurram and Noor Jahan shared a very good bond. It's a very sweet bond that they shared. And historians often believe that the fallout in this junta, or the fallout between Noor Jahan and Shah Jahan, happened when Noor Jahan married off her daughter Ladli with Jahangir's fourth son, her own stepson, the imbecilic Shahryar, and whom Noor Jahan tried to shape as the heir apparent after Jahangir. Now, all knew that Shah Jahan is maybe the next ruler, because Khushru was already, he was half blind and he was imprisoned. So he had no hope. Khushru had no hope. So it was Noor Jahan. Everybody knew that it's Shah Jahan who should have been the next emperor. But now the stepmother, Noor Jahan, is shaping her own son-in-law, Shahryar, to be the next emperor. So this is something that he couldn't digest. And so he becomes rebellious. So Noor Jahan was exceptionally successful in the conduct of international trade, and the quantum of wealth thus created gave her the financial reach to sponsor buildings, offer gifts, organize marriages and entertainments, and sponsored charity on a scale rarely seen in Mughal India. Now, this is a picture of Noor Jahan celebrating the return of Shah Jahan, that is Prince Khurram, after his successful campaign in Rajasthan and before he is going off to Deccan. And it is believed that she spent as much as 3 lakhs of tankas at that time for clothes, jewelry, and for revelry and all the occasions. So you can well imagine, and her wealth doesn't come from her husband, it comes from her own. And so, she builds beautiful beautiful monuments like the tomb of Itmad-ud-daulah, often referred as the baby Taj, because later on this symmetry, this structure, the Pitadura work that later much influences Shah Jahan's Taj Mahal. So inside the tomb, it is like this. So Noor Jahan, she defied the norms when she refused to be satiated only by leading the life of an empress in luxuries and in interior wards, rather redefined her role in administrative affairs. So historian Abraham Ereli, he's writing, but there was one fatal flaw in her. She was a woman, and in the prejudice of the age, women had no public role, and ambition was the prerogative of men. Thus, she has always been represented as crafty, her involvement in administrative affairs as manipulative. Her influence has always been represented in a pessimistic way. So her political significance has always been trivialized only because she was a woman. Now, this sarai that was constructed shows how far thinking she was. It was constructed mainly for the traders and the merchants, and it is believed that during its heydays, it could hold as much as 4,000 men and 4,000 horses. So very big caravan sarai. So Noor Jahan's influence in Jahangir is portrayed in the writings of many Europeans, and who often came as ambassadors or travelers. Men like William Hawkins, an early English trader at Mughal court, found Noor Jahan as the central figure to be appeased. And this is important, to gain favor. Now, Dutch traders like Francisco Palsittert, then Peter van den Broek, they all believed that she seduced the emperor with opium and drink. Even Thomas Roe of the British aristocrat who represented the English East India Company, who came to the court of Jahangir for concessions, all of them have this picture. But there's an opposite picture in Jahangir's own memoir, Tuzuki Jahangiri, where he acknowledges Noor Jahan's habitual care and how she persuaded him to curtail his cups of wine. In fact, that in 1726, when a retainer of Jahangir, Mahabat Khan, captures the emperor and keeps him as hostage, Noor Jahan, riding her great elephant, declares war on him and even fights him. Even though for the first time she loses, but eventually using diplomacy, she wins him back. So this is not favored by anybody. So though she has tremendous skill of shooting tigers, which is again a sign of sovereignty and is applauded by Jahangir and some contemporary travelers like the Italian traveler and adventurous Nicolai Manucci, later the historians found it manly and unladylike. Noor Jahan had left an indelible mark because of her deeds and enigmatic personality. Nevertheless, she was ambitious, scheming, and had her sights on being the Empress of India. But unlike Jahangir's other wives, who were also very, very famous and fabulous, but they couldn't rise. So unlike his other 19 wives, Noor Jahan refused to be a silent observer under her husband and rather played an active and intellectual role. So she has deconstructed the stereotyped role of the queen in Mughal India, and thus she was portrayed in a negative light as she pursued ambition and tragedy, the path of which was deemed unwomanly. So you can well imagine this is the tomb, and just see the state of its how it has been maintained. Now, as I said, that today Noor Jahan is celebrated mainly because of her of the romantic angle, that how she was being the supreme, the loving creature, and how she was the seductress. This is her, how she's now been portrayed. So just see how her epitome is portrayed. Now, she was quite a frustrated lady, I can say, because see how she's been showing that on the grave of the poor woman, do not light any lamp, not shower flowers, no moth to burn themselves in the fire of the lamp, and no nightingale shall announce her death. So she wanted to remain at the, when she died, at the very, she didn't want publicity. So this is how I would like to end my presentation, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your excellent lecture. I feel myself privileged to have you in my college days. This is just like time travel. I went back to my college days when you used to show us pictures while teaching us medieval history. Thank you so much for enriching us with so many unknown historical facts. There are some questions in our chat box. We will take those at the interactive session. Thank you once again, ma'am. Now we will move forward to our next speaker, Assistant Professor Bharbi Roy, Department of Philosophy, Scottish Church College. The title of her paper is Tarabai Sindhe's Tri Purush Tulana, a noteworthy voice against gender bias in the 19th century India. Ma'am, please proceed.
Let me share my screen first. Will you please enable me to share the screen now? Is my screen visible?
It is showing that you have started sharing screen. Yes, ma'am. Now it's visible.
Okay. Honorable Vice Principal, Syamaprasad College, Dr. Shushmita Mukherjee, Chairperson, Dr. Korobi Mitro, ICC Convener, Dr. Nivedita Bhattacharya, Shulobna, and other webinar committee members, my fellow panelists of today's technical session, and all other participants. Now, today we are focusing on the trajectory of feminism and gender sensitization in India, and I'll be speaking on Tarabai Shinde's Stri Purush Tulna. Now, we all are aware of the sex-gender dichotomy. We know that gender is a socio-political and cultural construction, and it is different from sex, which is biological in nature. We also know that the question of gender cannot be understood without feminism, which is an ideology that tries to find out the reasons behind women's subjugation in society. Now, feminism, we know that raises a lot of uncomfortable questions like women, men, and the other, their biological identity can be fixed, but are their roles fixed? Are behaviors of men and women same in the public? Do women and men have same rights? Now, Tarabai Shinde, back in the year 1882, raised similar questions. Now, who was Tarabai Shinde? She was born in the year 1850 in Buldhana in the present day Maharashtra. Now raised in a high caste, socially elite family, her father, Bapuji Hari Shinde, a head clerk in the office of the Deputy Commissioner of Revenues, homeschooled her. She studied Marathi, Sanskrit, and English and was well read in classical and modern literature. She was the only daughter. She had four brothers. She was married very young, but was granted more freedom in the household than most other Marathi wives of her time, since her husband moved into her parents' home. However, her marriage did not turn out to be successful. Now, Shinde was an associate of social activists Jyoti Rao Phule and Savitri Bai Phule, and was a member of their Shottoshotok Samaj. Her association with the Phules influenced her soul writing venture as well. She wrote the book in response to an article which appeared in 1881 in Pune Vaibhav about a criminal case against a young Brahmin upper caste widow, Vijay Lakshmi, in Surat, who had been convicted of murdering her illegitimate child for fear of public disgrace and sentenced to transportation for life. Shinde, having worked with widows from upper caste societies who were forbidden to remarry, was well aware of their conditions, and this incident shook her and inspired her to write the book. This is what she wrote in the introduction of her book. She writes, "I'm just a poor woman without any real intelligence who's been kept locked up and confined. But every day now, we have to look at some new and more horrible example of men who are really wicked and their shameless lying tricks. And people go about pinning the blame on women all the time as if everything bad was their fault. When I saw this, my whole mind began churning and shaking. I lost all my fear. I just couldn't stop myself writing about it in this very biting language." So, this book, Sri Purush Tulna, it is considered to be the first Indian feminist text. She attacks the dominance of patriarchal society. She puts forward certain arguments uh, which are hurled against women by the society, and then she goes on to reject them on logical grounds, justifying the innocence of women, thereby blaming the men for those. And she even writes the purpose of writing the book. She writes that God brought this amazing universe into being, and He it was also who created men and women both. So, is it true that only women's bodies are home to all kinds of wicked vices? Or have men got just the same faults as we find in women? I wanted this to be shown absolutely clearly, and that is the reason I have written this small book, to defend the honor of my entire sister country women. I am not looking at particular castes or families here. It's a comparison just between women and men. So she goes on to put forward the arguments. She says that women are often accused of witchcraft in the society, but as men have more intellect than that of women, so the evil deeds committed by men are far worse than witchcraft. Women are also considered to be suspicious and whimsical. Shinde argues that this is because women are uneducated and therefore all kinds of doubts arises in their minds. On the other hand, educated men are full of treacherous ideas and commits mistakes without hesitation. Women are considered to be violators of social norms, but Shinde defends that the conditions of women makes them to do so. Rich parents get their daughters married to poor man who lives at their home. The man considers his wife everything till he acquires money, after which she becomes useless. Men are deceitful, and she cites examples of babas or religious preachers who in reality only extract money from the common man and lead a luxurious life. Next, she defends the blame of prostitution. She writes, "What is a whore? Do you think she's some form of life that wasn't made in the same way as the rest of creation? Was it some other god who made her? In fact, whores are just some of those women you have seduced and lured away from their homes." In her writing, she refutes each and every flaws women are said to have. Her work exposes the hypocritical norms of the society and she argues against them. She is blatant in her arguments against men. Tarabai's knowledge about the Hindu Shastras is also seen in her deconstruction of the same. She reveals that the double standards in the treatment of men and women regarding marriage. She asks, what is the greatest crime that women commit? Is it adultery? Can adultery really be considered as an act of the most heinous nature? She writes, it isn't true that women in the past have never done it. Take the Shastras. Whose power you all talk so big about? If a king died, then without a direct heir, his queen could prolong the line with whichever of the sages she fancied, and her majesty would keep him on the job, wouldn't she? Till she had gone not one but 10 sons. What was going on then there? Wasn't that illicit sex? Wasn't that adultery? Uh, so she the major reason for the rigidity of the Hindu social order was that several of the practices had divine sanction. The greatest crime that a woman can commit, according to Shinde, is adultery. But Shinde argues that in matter of adultery also men are at fault. Now Tarabai, throughout her book, argued for women's equal share with men. She refuted to accept male superiority in gender relation. She used harsh language in her writings, and in conclusion, we can say that Shinde problematized the comparison between men and women. And while comparing them, she pointed out that faults commonly ascribed to women, such as superstition, suspicion, and treachery, were found to be more common in men. And her writing is of her work is significant because at a time when activists were primarily concerned with easily identifiable atrocities against women, she broadened the scope of analysis to include the entire ideological fabric of patriarchal society. So this was my brief paper.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It is really a fascinating lecture. We never thought of from this point of view.
Yes,
Thank you for enlightening us.
most welcome.
I would like to request our next speaker, Anirban Guha Thakurata, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Srirampur College, to deliver his lecture. He will speak on the politics of ideal wives in history, a study of selected Amar Chitra Katha title. Over to you.
Now the pandemic has taught us few celebrated phrases, I guess. The first is, am I audible? The second,
Yes.
yeah, the second is, am I visible?
Yes.
And obviously muting and unmuting. And talking about these cases in history, talking about women, talking about minority, talking about Dalits, in history is somewhere linked to these phrases. Am I visible? Am I audible? Muting and unmuting. I thank the organizers. I thank Syamaprasad College for inviting me here and providing me with this opportunity. I thank Dr. Shushmita Mukherjee, Dr. Korobi Mitro, and Dr. Nivedita Bhattacharya, and all the organizers, all the members of the organizing committee. Today, I guess I need to first go for the presentation. Just a second. Is this visible?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. My presentation today is on the politics of narrating the past. And I shall be focusing on Amar Chitra Katha and its handling of some historical female characters. I stress on the term characters rather than personalities, since historical narratives, like all narratives, are dealing with a characterization. And especially in Amar Chitra Katha, where storytelling often glides into history telling and vice versa. The term seems adequately expressive, and every character, after all, demands a plot, demands a stage, and that stage, that plot, is spatiotemporal as well as ideological and political. Now, as I go into the slides, first of all, I really need to, it has almost become compulsory to state that we need to view comics seriously because they are actually serious and can ventilate anything and everything and demands a different sort of critical literacy. Actually, it is a kind of a writing, and it can write about anything. And that it can get serious, that it is serious, is well represented by the fact that Moz is about the Holocaust, Pride of Baghdad is about the Iraq war, Delhi Calm is about the emergency years in India. This side, that side is an anthology of graphic tales on partition and displacement. So I guess nothing gets more serious than this. Comics is a kind of a writing and demands a different sort of a critical literacy. And to view Amar Chitra Katha as history, first of all, certain declarations. Not all Amar Chitra Katha titles are historical. And Amar Chitra Katha used to come with that famous tagline, root to roots. And therein lies a sense that there is somewhere operational a sense of representation of past, a sense of history, a plan of history. In fact, Amar Chitra Katha was a great popularizer of graphic history. And one such occurrence occurs in the biocomic of Anand Pai. And here you have an instance where in this very graphic biography, Anand Pai actually took Sultana Razia issue of Amar Chitra Katha to the school to prove that it can actually replace the quote-unquote dry history books of history and provide the students with a greater awareness of the past. In fact, there are certain takers of this very view. In fact, that's a very valid claim made by Anand Pai, at least on the methodological front of it, in the sense that people like Stephen Clark, Spencer Clark, people like Ben Lander, they have always found graphic history to be providing the audience with a greater sense of humanization of history. And it provides a polyphonality in the narration of the past, which definitely provides the students with a greater scope for historical thinking in the history classroom. So, at least methodologically, this claim seems to be valid. And now, moving to Amar Chitra Katha titles, again, I would come up with certain declarations again. I'm actually focusing on certain narratives of Satidaha, certain narratives of self-immolation available in the titles like Padmini, Mirabai, Rupmati, Rani Durgavati. The common features are they are all Rajput characters. They are all of the medieval period. And therefore, it gives us a chance to have a comparison between the Hindu and Muslim societies with a focus on the status of women. And after all, since Amar Chitra Katha titles were mostly graphic hagiographies, there is always this question of creating role models. Now, that may sound very unscientific because no flesh and blood human character can at all get ideal, can at all be role models. But after all, Amar Chitra Katha was also meant for the children. And naturally, there is always that steady binary of good and evil, heroic and unheroic in children's literature. So we have to discuss this interpolation of the literary and the historical with the in this very scope of our argument. Now I move to the comics pages. And mind you, these are histories as far as Untitled Katha is concerned. Now, in this very first slide that I am having, this is a splash page, the famous splash page of Padmini, the opening splash page. But before coming to this, I would stress on the cover illustration of this very title. Now, though I don't have I don't have this one, that very cover image in this very presentation. In that very cover design, you will find that Padmini is seen with a dish of ritualistic entrails, standing happy and determined, glorious and poised, while leading a procession of Rajput women to Jauhar. And the radiant glow of the power flames add to the luster of her skin, making it luminous. So in that very image, you have a sense that the central character and her fellow women were happy in identifying with, reconciling with the value system of the Rajput world. In fact, it is this politics of this delineation that this paper will discuss. But before that, what kind of values shaped this world? And after all, what kind of values were so magnetic that women used to reconcile with them? In this very opening splash page, as you can see, Padmini doesn't appear. She's a central character. She doesn't appear. But she is here spiritually portrayed. We all know how the land, we all know how the earth has always been femininized. And this womanization, this feminization has a patriarchal construct available in it. And what appears here in this page is a geological and spiritual portrait of Chittor, with a grand decor of the fort and martial superiority. So it is the world of masculine honor and valor. As I move to the second page of this comic, you have two full-width panels delineating the Rajput world, its political order, and the court. It's Raja Ratna Sen's court, and you have in the proceedings that this world of valor is not at all merely martial. It has a deep respect for aesthetics. In fact, Ratna Sen's court is seen as a world where both the king and the courtiers are engaged in thorough aesthetic appreciation of the woman body. The female court singer seems to be a flesh and blood replica or a mirror image of Saraswati in the second second full width panel that you have. And both are equally admired. So there is no question of the supposed objectification of the woman, and it seems there is no sense of lust-drivenness in the Rajput men. This is an ideal world, and this ideal world of men deserves an ideal woman, and that is Padmini. That's how she gets introduced. And in the next page that I have, that's the famous wedding image of Ratna Sen and Padmini. She is seen as the personification of beauty and marrying her seems to be an appreciation of that beauty. Look at the caption here. Deeply impressed by the bard's account of Padmini, Ratnasen went to Sinhala and married her. Padmini is happily looking gracefully downwards, while the husband walks with his head held high. The flames signify purity, and in this tale of honor, they are protectors of honor and purity. And these flames are going to play a very symbolic role. But there is always a conflict in a drama, in reality, in history. Conflict of values, conflict of personalities, conflict of types, stereotypes as well. And while we had a look at the Ratnasen court, we had understood the ideal nature of the Rajput court, there is that oppositional portrait. And here stands in stark opposition to this ideal world is the world of Khilji, the Muslim aggressor, who lives with othered women. Look at these women. They are starkly oppositional to the grace, the sublimity, and obviously the kind of a figure of the loyal wife available in Padmini. And they are seductively dressed to sexually appease the Sultan in his harem. And again, the harem setting does only appear, and in fact, the very issue of polygamy in history does only appear in ACK's handling of Muslim figures. Even when they are talking about Hindu societies, there is hardly any visible evidence, direct evidence of patriarchy available in that society. And we need to focus on the saffron green antithesis as well in this connection. They are not merely colors, but signifiers of types. Throughout ACK, we come across zealous Muslim villains. There are, of course, evil Hindus, but Muslim rulers are not at all hagiographically presented. Now, the interpolation of honor with self-sacrifice via jauhar, sati, and other such customs seem to be celebrated as indicators of cherished values. While ACK was meant for entertaining and educating children, there is hardly any departure from the violent display of violent events. There is hardly any departure from obsess. In fact, here in these visual signifiers, there is glorification of the practices as they appear echoing a sense of tragic dignity and honor in case of Padmini or Rupmati. You can find Padmini stories in the left side, and in the right side you have Rupmati, and obviously you have the othered women of the harem. And we can come to a kind of a conclusion that here there is that extreme interpolation of honor with self-sacrifice. And as we zoom in this very scene of sacrifice, we can actually quote from Yagya Sharma, who was actually the author of Padmini. She was asked by Maclean, and what explanation ACK has for this is that, you see, our cultural values today look down upon sati, but cultural values change over time. You know, a lot of ugly things happened in history. Women of that period were willing to give the ultimate sacrifice of their honor, for their honor, and this is what the value is, not sati itself. So there is an apparent deglamorization of the sati in this very explanation. But when we look at the images and when we look at the grammar, the visual grammar of the entire thing, now just think that here in that very page where you have these three panels, there is the greater accentuation provided via that large panel of the sati hood. So it is visually accentuated. And look at in this zoomed portrait how there is no depiction of the ugly that Yagya Sharma talks about. There is no depiction of the horror or pain involved in self-immolation. And as per this arrangement, there seems to be an apparent glorification or celebration of the practice as well. But definitely, when there is that interpolation with honor. And when we move to a character like Rani Durgavati, she is not the submissive kind. She is not at all like Padmini or Rupmati. She is, after all, a Virangana. She goes against her father, marries the gone prince who is supposed to be inferior to Rajputs, runs the state and leads the people to victorious battles, kills even a tiger as displayed here, and yet is seen as a true Rajputani, celebrated, and she is heroic and proud, and finally seen killing herself to save her honor. Now, I come to a very different character. Moving away from them, I come to Meera. She is, in fact, the first of the Bhakti poets and the first woman in history to feature in ACK. While historically, Meera is bound to be seen as a rebel, she is always seen as an ideal Hindu wife. And the visual signifier of being an ideal Hindu wife is to bow down before the husband, touch his feet, and spontaneously walk in accordance with the husband's wishes when he even abandons her. She refuses to die on her husband's funeral pyre. She refuses to worship the Kuldevi, leaves her husband's home and roams, travels to Dwarka, Vrindavan, and Mathura, and so on. But all this seems to be a visual, seems to be the visual signifier of her image as a sadhvi. And that image does not at all rebel against the image of an ideal Hindu wife. And in fact, her sadhvi image, which is in a way rebellious enough, her very act of refusing to worship the Kuldevi was an act of rebellion. All this seems to be rationalized, seems to be sanctioned, not as cases of rebellion, but as signifiers of her sadhvi image, which was not at all fighting a battle against the image of an ideal Hindu wife. So her historical rebellion seems to be sanitized, and she is suddenly turned into an ideal Hindu wife. And therein lies the politics of visibility, the politics of muting and unmuting. Now, is this everywhere the same story? When we come to ACK's representations of Sultana Razia, in fact, this was the title with which Anand Pai had proven that graphic histories can actually replace dry history. While methodologically that claim might be absolutely okay, in this very case, look at the very physical evidence available in depiction of the patriarchy available in Islamic societies. Now, Akbar about Rani Durgavati says that she is just a mere woman. Think of Alauddin Khilji. Alauddin Khilji completely objectifies Padmini. And Sultana Razia, that very issue, has that back cover inscription where it is stated that while she led her armies and was a brave soldier, her only enemy were the times that did not accept a woman as a leader. Now, the Islamic society doesn't accept the woman as a leader, but did the Hindu societies at all accept the woman as a leader or sanction her autonomy? Now, that side of the story hardly gets told in ACK histories. And I come to the last slide of my presentation. This is from A Gardener in the Wasteland. This talks about Savitribai Phule, Jyotiba Phule. And people like Savitribai Phule or Pandita Ramabai, Tarabai Shinde, these people, or even Abola Devi with her wonderful insights in the world of medicine, her achievements, they don't get recorded. In fact, people like Savitribai Phule do not appear in ACK. They are not part of the glorious tradition that ACK talks about. And in this very graphic novel, A Gardener in the Wasteland, we find probably the actual image of how women, how widows were treated in the erstwhile Hindu societies. So, since this webinar is about sensitization, and sensitization involves an act of accepting, an act of acknowledging of a problem in the past and in the present, so that we can rectify, we can improve in future. And I guess I wanted to deal with the past problems which are still present to some extent and which need to be rectified and not set aside. Thank you.
This is really an excellent and mind-absorbing lecture with so many perfect picture illustration. Thank you, sir, for highlighting the importance of graphic history writing. This is indeed a new style of historical analysis. I know there are many questions in our chat box already. We will get back to you at the interactive session, sir. Thank you. Our next speaker is Chandrabali Das, Assistant Professor, Political Science Department, Khidirpur College. She will deliver her lecture on women's rights and role of Indian judiciary. Another interesting topic. Over to you, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you. I am really thankful to Syamaprasad College and History Department for giving me the opportunity to present my paper. Now, I shall be highlighting on the role of the Indian judiciary in protecting the rights of women. Now, at the beginning of this webinar, Dr. Korobi Mitro has already stated that our constitution has already guaranteed several rights and several, I should say, fundamental rights to the women folk of India. Now, my paper is an attempt to analyze that until and unless these rights, which are actually enshrined in the Constitution, these rights are not fruitful until and unless they are protected, they are secured, and they are enforced by some judicial institutions. And my PPT presentation is actually an attempt to show how progressive the role has been played by our judicial institutions. Especially, I shall be talking about the Indian Supreme Court, which has been from time to time very much liberal and very much progressive in passing several judgments and verdicts to protect the rights of our Indian women. Okay. Now, a very good evening to all of you. Dr. Shushmita Mukherjee, Dr. Korobi Mitro, Dr. Nivedita Bhattacharya, Professor Shulagna Shom, and my heartfelt thanks to all the other organizers of this webinar. I shall begin my PPT presentation with all your kind permission. Okay. The role of the Indian judiciary in protecting the rights of women. First of all, I would like to highlight the role our constitution, or rather the Constitution of India, has ensured certain rights to our women folk, especially the right to life with dignity, optimal growth and freedom from discrimination to all people of India, irrespective of religion, race, caste, sex, and the place of birth. So what is the implication? The implication is that all women along with men are equal in the eyes of law, and they are also entitled to equal protection of law. They are free to live a life devoid of violence and any form of threat. Okay. But despite this constitutional declaration, we find that women have been subjected to discrimination from time to time, and the powerful hold of the patriarchal order in our country has prevented the women folk from exercising the rights which have been enshrined for them in the Constitution. Now, if we make a distinction between private and personal, we will find that it is an undeniable fact that any form of violence deprives women from the right to survival, well-being, and development. In fact, violence against women, in my opinion, is a threat to the fundamental right to live with dignity. And women have been often subject to violence. They are subject to violence, domestic violence, social violence, which is a very much hindrance to their fundamental right to life with dignity, and also discrimination from time to time is a violation of a basic human right. Now, internationally speaking, we find several attempts have been undertaken to ensure that no violence occurs against women. 25th of November, that is the day when Mirabal sisters were murdered for protesting against the oppressive rule of Rafael Trujillo. That day is observed as the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Similarly, 10th of December every year is celebrated as the World Human Rights Day. Why? Because on this particular day, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The period between 25th November and 10th December every year is observed as the 16 days of activism on gender-based violence as a symbol to link violence against women and human rights. Now, let us give a glance to the provisions of the Constitution to protect the rights of women. As you can see, Article 14, Article 15. Article 14 states about equality before law and equal protection of law, which implies that men and women are both equally entitled to equality before law and equal protection of law. Article 15 states that the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or the place of birth. This implies that women, just like men, should not be subject to any form of discrimination. Article 15, Clause 3 permits states to make special provisions for women and children to safeguard their rights. And keeping in view this fact, the women of India have been discriminated for centuries. This article is an attempt to adopt affirmative action so as to emancipate women from the multiple chaos of exclusion in politics, education, employment, etc. Article 16 deals with the right to equal opportunity in matters of public employment. Article 21 ensures the right to life and personal liberty. Article 23 and 24 prohibit all kinds of exploitation, and particularly Article 23 prohibits human trafficking and forced labor, to which generally the women folk are prone to be subjected. Apart from these fundamental rights, there are certain directive principles of state policy which too guarantee certain progressive rights to the women. Article 39A, as you can see, calls upon the states to secure for men and women equally the right to an adequate means of livelihood. Article 39D ensures equal pay for equal work to both men and women. Article 42 provides for securing just and human conditions of work and maternity relief. Articles 243D and T make it compulsory for the state to reserve seats in panchayats and nagarpalikas for women. Now, as I have already told you that many provisions are there in the Constitution, many acts have been enacted from time to time in our legislatures, but until and unless these are secured and enforced by the court of law, they can never be materialized. All laws, all acts will only remain in books. They will never be implemented unless the judiciary interferes. And it is here that we will look at the progressive role that the courts of India have been playing, especially the Supreme Court, in protecting the rights of women. Now, let us look at the verdicts delivered by the judiciary to uphold women's rights. The Supreme Court of India, in the famous case of P. Sagar versus the state of Andhra Pradesh, this is the Andhra Pradesh High Court, which observed in P. Sagar versus the state of Andhra Pradesh that education is something mandatory for the development of personality of all human beings in general and of women in particular. And here a reference was made to Article 15, Clause 3, whereby it is stated that reservation for women, particularly in the educational institutions, is something which can never be denied. This verdict was given by the Andhra Pradesh High Court in the famous P. Sagar versus the state of Andhra Pradesh case. Now, prevention of sexual abuse at the workplace. This was the famous case of Vishakha versus the state of Rajasthan. Here, the Supreme Court of India laid down certain guidelines for protecting women against sexual abuse, which was later enacted as the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013 by the Indian Parliament. Now, what if she is a prostitute? Even a prostitute is a woman and a human being. This ruling was given by the court in the famous case of Buddhadev Karmakar versus the state of West Bengal. Now, what happened in this case? A prostitute, a sex worker, was brutally murdered by the appellant Buddhadev Karmakar. The later kicked her with fists and legs and she fell down on the floor. And this inhuman treatment meted out to her was actually witnessed by 4 persons, her 4 friends, Abida, Maya, Asha and Parvati. Now, what was the decision of the court? The apex court in its division bench headed by Markandeya Karju and J. Gyan Shudha Mishra stated, we strongly feel that the central and state governments through social welfare boards should prepare schemes for rehabilitation all over the country for physically and sexually abused women, commonly known as prostitutes, as we are of the view that prostitutes also have the right to live with dignity, which is very much secured by Article 21 of our Constitution. Now, what is the glorious aspect of this decision by the court is that it was pointed out that prostitutes are not really women of low character. While deciding on this case, the judges quoted from several novels of Bengali writers like Suresh Chandra Chattopadhyay, where prostitutes have been portrayed as women of dignity with several human qualities, and so their right to life cannot be denied by any person. Now, next comes the famous case, two-finger test, it's like getting raped once again. This was the famous case of Lillu at Rajesh and another versus the state of Haryana. In this case, the Supreme Court exceptionally took note of the pain, the agony and the trauma of a raped victim who had to undergo two-finger test, furnish her character certification, and after analyzing through several precedents, declared rightfully that it is a violation of victims' right to privacy and dignity. Already by being raped, a person's psychology has been destroyed, her right to life has been destroyed, her dignity has been destroyed, and now by conducting this two-finger test, she cannot be subjected to rape once more. Now stop acid attacks and restrict the sale of acid. It was seen that in this Lakshmi versus the Union of India case, it was the court once again which had to step in to order the chief secretaries, the concerned secretaries of the state governments and the administrators of the union territories to curb and restrict the sale of acid across the length and breadth of the country for the security of women. The court held that acid attack on a woman is equivalent forcibly taking away her identity from her, and such a heinous crime was terrorizing women all over the society. Another progressive verdict was that unwed mothers need not name the child's father. ABC versus the state entity of Delhi. Now, it was stated that it is not mandatory for an unwed mother to state the name of the father of her child. It is known to us, to everybody, that when a child is given birth to by his or her mother, mother is the natural guardian of the child, and therefore the custodianship or the whereabouts of the child's father are not really required. This was actually an avant-garde verdict on gender equality in the sense that it protected every fatherless child from social stigma and at the same time ensuring the fundamental right of an unwed mother. Now, another progressive verdict. Living under the same roof, you are married under law. This was the Dhannulal and others versus Ganesh Ram and others case. Now, Supreme Court decided that live-in relationships always have a tendency to curse the woman, to deprive her of all the rights of her partner, and ultimately leave her on the streets. If a woman lives with her partner for 20 years or more, and even if she is not the legally wedded wife of the man with whom she was cohabiting the place, she cannot be deprived of the right to property of her partner. This was the verdict given by the court. It is actually our society, a social stigma that always makes a woman who doesn't marry a man but lives with that man to portray that woman as a one of low character, and it is the habit of denying her the right to live with dignity. But the court took a progressive step and said that the women, their right to choose whether to marry or not should be accepted, and therefore women who are not wed to a man with whom they have been living, they should be also guaranteed the right to gender justice and equality. Now, let us look at the right to privacy from a non-conventional point of view. Generally, when we say that we have the right to privacy in our homes, we should make a difference between a woman's right to privacy at home and a man's right to privacy. It is a long prevalent practice of the Indian folk to attach an extremely high value to male decisional autonomy when it comes to family matters inside their home. Here we find that the women are hardly given any liberty and any space to decide on the matters within the family. Freedom of decision in private and public sphere. Now, this is a right which both men and women have to cherish equally. If we look at Rabindranath Tagore's famous short story, Letter from a Wife, Stri Patro, there we find that the wife Mrinal writes to her husband, I found myself beautiful as a free human mind, and this conception of herself is what led her to live a life in which she could hardly exercise any decisional liberty. So today also, we find that it is hardly possible for women to access liberty and dignity when important decisions are being taken inside the family. And often the right to privacy is misused by the male folk to defend the exemption of marital rape from sexual assault laws, as well as to discourage the state from making a just interference in matters of domestic violence. Now, let us come to an interesting issue of public interest litigation. We find that most of the women, majority of the women who are subject to domestic violence belong to the poor and economically weaker sections of the family. They hardly have the knowledge to write or to lodge a case in the High Court or the Supreme Court against their violence to which they are subject to. Now, in order to enable these type of women to gain justice in the court of law, this interesting concept of public interest litigation has been developed so that even women from the economically and educationally backward classes can come forward with their complaints of violence, and the courts are entitled to entertain their cases. Furthermore, the Indian judiciary recognized the fact that marital rape is a very cruel form of domestic violence. According to the Supreme Court, rape is not only a crime against the entire society, but it also destroys the psychology of a woman and pushes her into deep emotional crisis. Now, let us quickly look at some of the recent acts of the judiciary to curb domestic violence during the COVID-19 lockdown. As we can find that it was during this lockdown period that the cases of domestic violence rose abruptly. And in this regard, the Jammu and Kashmir High Court gave a very progressive verdict, taking note of the inability of women and children from the economically weaker sections in India to access online platform for assistance. The court suggested certain measures to ensure that immediate assistance is extended to such vulnerable persons. And some measures were suggested by the court, that is, creation of dedicated funding to address issues of violence against women and girls as part of the COVID-19 response, increased availability of call-in services to facilitate discreet reporting of abuse, increased tele or online legal counseling service for women and girls, designated informal safe spaces for women like grocery stores and pharmacies where they can report their domestic violence and abuse without alarming the perpetrators. Now I shall conclude with the famous novel of Henrik Ibsen, A Doll's House. Here Nora Helmer, the wife of Torvald, says to her husband at the fag end of the drama throughout her life, she has been treated as a doll first by her father, then by her husband. Despite repeated insistence by her husband to stay back, Nora ultimately leaves her family and home, saying she has duties to herself that are just as important and that she cannot be a good mother or wife without learning to be more than a plaything. Now, in today's patriarchal society of India, there are lots of Noras who are struggling to achieve a reasonable opportunity for self-fulfillment, development, fighting the conventional societal norm of suppression of male desires of autonomy, dignity, and positions of prominence in the society by the male domination. We are thankful to our courts for they have been trying to secure the rights of such Noras throughout India. Thank you. I end my presentation.
Thank you, ma'am, for discussing such an interesting area of women's right in the judiciary system of India. You have discussed so well with specific case studies. Thank you, ma'am. We will get back to you with a question which has been asked in our chat box. Now, we have to move forward towards our last speaker, Tina Basu, Assistant Professor, Department of History, Jivantala Rokeya Mahavidyalaya. She will speak on Bibha Chaudhuri, a woman scientist, the cloud capped star. Ma'am.
Good afternoon, Dr. Shushmita Mukherjee, Vice Principal, Syamaprasad College, Chairperson, Dr. Korobi Mitro, the Convener, Dr. Nibedita Bhattacharya, Moderator, Professor Shulagna Shom, Technical Team, my fellow speakers and audience. And of course, thank you, Syamaprasad College webinar organizing team for giving me this opportunity. The title of my topic is Bibha Chaudhuri, a woman scientist, the cloud-capped star. India has a rich cultural heritage. Not only men, women also played an important role in the development of Indian society, culture, and politics. From ancient India, we found many famous women, names like Lopamudra, Apollo, Lilavati, Maitreyi, Gargi, and others. They were learned women. Some of them were philosophers, some were mathematicians, and some of them were poets. Not only in educational field, but also in politics, as an administrator or a warrior. Indian women contributed a lot. Though the degradation had started from the later Vedic age, it is still continuing. Now they are the most oppressed section of the Indian society. They had to face two-tier oppression, one from their own patriarchal society and the colonial subjugation earlier. Then they have to face the hardship of being a lady of a third world country. In this article, I will try to tell a story of a woman who proved to be a highly intellectual person, but unfortunately, she did not get the deserved attention, respect, or honor. Through her story, my main intention is to prove that women were the victims of the patriarchal social structure of India. Though they had intellect, courage, and inquisitive mind, they failed to attain the height that they deserved. Here I will discuss about Bibha Chaudhuri, a lesser known woman scientist whose achievements and fame was shrouded by the work of great male scientists like Homi Bhabha, Bikram Sarabhai, and M.J.K. Menon. She worked with Bhabha and Sarabhai at Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai and in Physical Research Laboratory in Ahmedabad. She was the first Indian woman in the field of high energy physics, working on particle physics and cosmic rays. Unfortunately, we know very little about these great scientists. Very little written evidence has been found about her life and work. Rita Pali, wife of physicist Deepak Sarkar, was the sole informer about her. She was very closely attached with Bibha Chaudhuri's family as a next door neighbor. Besides, we get two Bengali writers where she is mentioned. One is Ranotosh Chatterjee's Gyan or Vigyan, and the other is R. Naha's Ek Bishrito Bangali Vikyani. Apart from these two articles, recently two scholarly persons wrote a biography of Dr. Bibha Chaudhuri. Rajendra Singh and S.C. Roy wrote the book from a German publication, A Jewel Unearthed, Bibha Chaudhuri, the story of an Indian woman scientist. Now I will tell about her early life. Bibha Chaudhuri was born in 1913. Her father, Bonku Bihari Chaudhuri, was a physician. According to some source, their original surname was Chatterjee, but because of their wealth and prosperity, they gave the title Chaudhuri. Basically, they were the Jamindars of Bhandarhati of Hugli in West Bengal. Her mother, Urmila Devi, on the other hand, hailed from Borishal, presently in Bangladesh. Urmila Devi was a daughter of a Brahmo missionary. This Brahmo influence changed their outlook totally. This Brahmo connection enriched and broadened their mind. Bonku Bihari Chatterjee had 5 daughters and a son. Enlightened Bonku Bihari gave equal educational opportunity to his 6 children, and they all became well-educated and well-established individuals. Interestingly, Bibha Chaudhuri and her siblings were unmarried. Maybe it was difficult for finding an appropriate match for highly educated people in a small community like Brahmo Samaj. Her extended family was also very famous in Kolkata. Nirmala Sarkar, wife of renowned Bengali doctor Nilratun Sarkar, was her mother, Urmila's elder sister. Dr. Devendra Mohan Bose was their son-in-law. Later, he became Bibha Chaudhuri's research guide in Bose Institute. Bibha Chaudhuri had her initial learning from Bethune School and obtained her BSc Physics Honours degree from Kolkata Scottish Church College. She obtained her MSc degree in Physics from Calcutta University in the year of 1936. She was the only female student in her batch. After MSc, she engaged herself in research work in Calcutta University under the guidance of colleague professor of Calcutta University, D.M. Bose, her brother-in-law. It was hard that Mr. Bose initially was not very keen to accept her as a student, mainly due to family pressure, and secondly, after the incident of C.V. Raman, he accepted her as his research worker. The incident was that famous scientist C.V. Raman refused to guide a woman named Kamala Soni. She started Shottabrahu outside Raman's office, and at last Raman was forced to accept her request. The story proves that in a male-dominated society like the Indian society, gender inequality and discrimination was normal. Vibha was victim of that. But at the same time, she had the courage and determination to fulfill her dreams, though many times she had to give up her goal due to rejection and non-availability of resources. Still, she continued her research and became one of the pioneering women scientists of India. In 1938, when Dr. D.M. Bose joined Bose Institute as the director, every student, including Vibha Chaudhuri, shifted their base from Calcutta University to Bose Institute. In Bose Institute, she engaged herself in serious research work, and as a result, she contributed towards the discovery of masons using photographic plates, and during this research period, she published 3 papers consecutively in Nature. Bose and Chaudhuri carried out a series of experiments during 1939 to 42 at the high altitudes of Darjeeling, Sandakphu, and Firzong using the photographic emulsion technique. Unfortunately, the worldwide political scenario changed and the Second World War broke out, which indirectly hampered her research work. She and her guide D.N. Bose had to stop their experiment due to non-availability of more sensitive emulsion plates. As a citizen of a poor colonized country, they failed to make history. On the other hand, 7 years later of their discovery of masons, C.F. Powell got Nobel Prize using the same method and technique of these 2 Indian scientists. But Powell acknowledged Bose and Chaudhuri's pioneering contribution in his work. After this saddening incident, Vibha Chaudhuri left India. According to Nature, she left because of lack of research material at the Bose Institute. Now, she started a new journey at the Cosmic Ray Laboratory of PMS Backlight at the University of Manchester around 1945. Here, she started to work on air showers in cosmic ray. Later, Dr. PMS Blacklight got Nobel Prize in 1949. Vibha Chaudhuri became famous in Manchester within a few years. The Manchester Herald, a local newspaper, reported about her work and mentioned her as Meet India's new woman scientist. She has an eye for cosmic rays. Bridget Maxwell took an interview with her before writing the news about her. In that interview, she was questioned by the interviewer and that why she had chosen physics as a specialization. She replied simply that I followed my inclination. Mr. Bridget was pleased with her reply and mentioned in the article that mathematics presented no problem to Miss Chaudhuri. She took to the study like a duck to the water. Vibha Chaudhuri submitted her thesis titled Extensive Air Showers Associated with Penetrating Particles on 1949. The thesis was examined by Lajos Janose and John J. Wilson. And after she flawlessly defended her thesis, he obtained her PhD degree in 1952. In abroad, she not only worked in Manchester University, but also in Michigan University. There, she worked with Professor John G. Wilson. She also got a stipend for attending physics department as a visiting lecturer there. After returning to India, she applied in Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. Famous Indian scientist Homi Bhabha then was searching for a young scientist. After getting recommendation from John G. Wilson, she joined TIFR in 1949. She stayed there till 1957. She was the first woman researcher selected by Homi Bhabha to join the newly established Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. After leaving TIFR, she spent nearly 1 year abroad. Then she returned to India and moved to Ahmedabad Physical Research Laboratory. She was not only a high-graded scientist, at the same time, India's famous plasma physicist, Professor Jogesh C. Saxena, was completed his PhD under her guidance. He was impressed not only by her knowledge, but also by her teaching ability, dedication for new experiments, and helpful nature. According to Dr. Saxena, she was a very good teacher, and to take care that I kept up with the required studies while doing the experiments and collecting data, and she provided the books and papers for that. She had a very good understanding of the subject and was of great help in analyzing and interpretation of the experimental data. In addition to the cosmic rays and high energy physics, Vibha Chaudhuri taught him French language, which was the part of the PhD curriculum at Gujarat University at that time. Vibha Chaudhuri was inclined to experiments, and that's why she engaged herself in many scientific experiments after coming back to her motherland. She was deeply involved with polar gold mine experiment using an indigenously developed detector to be placed at 7 feet and to be operated in conjunction with the extensive air showers array of TFIR on the ground. After that, she was planning to start a new experimental project with Vikram Sarabhai at Mount Abu on radio frequency emissions associated with extensive air showers. Unfortunately, Dr. Sarabhai's death shattered her dreams. The new director of PRL did not permit her to proceed with the new plan. Devastated, Vibha Chaudhuri took voluntary retirement and returned to her hometown, Calcutta. She was a born scientist. She started a new life here, engaged herself in physics research in Shah Institute of Nuclear Physics, University of Calcutta, and Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science. In 1983, she participated in a national conference in Amritsar, Punjab, where prominent cosmic ray researchers were invited. She died in her Broad Street residence on 2nd June 1991. She never retired from research. Her last paper was published in the Indian Journal of Physics in 1990. Vibha Chaudhuri was very much particular about her research work, and she published her work mainly in Indian scientific journals, though she had her publications in Nature and Proceedings of the Physical Society of London. She believed that her work was not completed yet. They needed more improvements, and for this reason, she was reluctant to publish her articles in international journals. But she attended many international conferences. A researcher, Vibha Chaudhuri, did not get any recognition throughout her life and after. She died in 1991 unsung and unheard in Calcutta. It's a surprise to know that she did not get a place among the 98 scientists of uneven quality in the book called Lilavati's Daughters, the Women Scientists of India, edited by Rohini Godbole and Ram Ramsamy and published by the Indian Academy of Sciences, Bangalore. She was not even elected as a fellow in those three scientific associations of India. Even she did not get a recognition in the book on Scientifically Your Selected Indian Women Scientists, published by the Journal of Scientometric Research. They discussed about 13 Indian women scientists, but they missed the name of Dr. Vibha Chaudhuri. But her biographers believe that they tried to write a story of courage and determination of a lady born more than 100 years ago for our younger generation to emulate. In a lecture, Hardeep Singh Virag, professor of Punjab University, told that he believed that Vibha Chaudhuri was a Mary Curie of India. She deserved the Nobel Prize for her work on discovery of meson along with C.F. Powell of Bristol University in 1947. But Indian society was meager to acknowledge her achievements. But at last, she got recognition from the world last year in 2019, when the International International Astronomical Union on December 17 announced that a yellow star that looks hotter, bigger, and older than Sun and 340 light years away from us would be called Biba. The star has been named in honor of the pioneering Indian woman scientist Bibha Chaudhuri. Bibha means in Bengali a bright beam of light. Now, I came to the critical juncture. Still, Bibha Chaudhuris are few in Indian society. According to Godbole and Ramaswamy, till a few years back, only 5% of the fellows of the Indian National Science Academy were women. Namrata Gupta and A.K. Sharma, the authors of the book titled Women and Science in India, believe that because of three burdens, women are still lacking behind in the field of science. These are careers, home, and the long hours in the laboratory that demanded any scientific study and research. In this topic, Bibha Chaudhuri herself once opined a view that women are terrified of physics. That is the trouble. It is a tragedy that we have so few women physicists today. In this age, when science and the physics particularly is more important than ever, women should study atomic power. If they don't understand how it works, how can they help decide how it should be used? I can count the women physicists I know, both in India and England, on the fingers of one hand. At school, scientifically inclined girls choose chemistry, perhaps because a really sound grasp of higher mathematics is one essential of any physicist's equipment. It's true that the outlook of the society is also readily changing with the exposure of liberalism and globalization. Now, this is the high time that the educated women of India take the charge of inspiring young women folk to come and take up scientific research seriously. Vidyasagar Rammohan Rai were the pathfinders, and the ladies like Bibha Chaudhuri, Kadumini Ganguly were our impetus, role model, and guiding force. They fought the battle which helped us to be what we are today. Now, our duty is to give them their deserved recognition. Bibha Chaudhuri's contribution to science was not an ordinary one, but was highly significant. That's why I selected a woman who had been a great scientist but had been shrouded by her male counterparts. According to her biographers, Dr. S.C. Roy and Rajinder Singh, she was the victim of gender discrimination. From this platform, we have to take a oath that we should not allow any kind of discrimination regarding gender biasness. Gender discrimination is a part of gender sensitization in our society, though in legal terms, women have the equal rights, but women face various problems in their everyday life. So there is a great need to sensitize the society on the basis of gender. Women empowerment through gender sensitization is one of the key criteria to unleash the potentiality of women, and that is our duty. All educated women have to come forward to change this scenario. We should remind the society that from ancient times, women are intellectually sound. Only the society tried to discourage them, force them to live and think only about their surroundings. Patriarchal society was misusing female energy, inquisitiveness, and hunger for knowledge at the sake of their well-being only. But now the time has ripened enough to assert our views and time to convince the society that the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that can rule the world. Thank you.
This is indeed a fantastic lecture, ma'am. And I'm delighted to know that she was from Scottish Church College, my alma mater. I wondered how little we know about this august woman. Uh, History is silent about this intelligent path-breaking woman. Thank you for choosing this topic, ma'am. I think this will encourage others to work on these forgotten ladies. Thank you. After these 5 excellent lectures, I request our chairperson, Dr. Korbe Mitra ma'am, to share her observation on today's papers. Ma'am.
Hello, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I am actually overwhelmed with the presentations. I cannot comment on each and every presentation individually because I think it is better to take the questions that is more important, because these questions are also coming from some inquisitive minds, young minds. So still then, I will just make some general comments. So first of all, I'll thank all the young researchers for the brilliant selection of their topics of discussion, especially in a situation when we are sitting at home for nearly 6 months. Obviously, this session is a mental relief and provided academic breathing space to us all, especially to me. Now I will make some comments. All the papers centered on mind-absorbing themes. Very informative and well-researched articles are these. These articles, it is quite clear that these articles are products of deep exploration and researching mind. This provides clear insight into the problematized field of study. They are also to be credited for who have shown their PPTs, their special collections of Mughal miniatures, pages from Amar Chitra Katha, which was also my favorite pastime to read in my childhood, and Tarabai Shinde's excerpts, some judicial portions. All these, and the last one, this there is no PPT. Still, then the paper was very informative. My next point is that all of them have raised very pertinent issues in their respective domains of research. If I comment, then I'll see that 4 of these papers have revolved around stories of women's marginalization and victimhood to gender discrimination, while the 5th one, here she was the 4th one. Still then, she focused on the judicial remedies, if I am correct. Chandraboli, if I am correct, this was the focus. And at the end, I'll again thank Professor Shushmita Mukherjee, Shulagna Shom, and her webinar team for an excellent performance level. Thank you, everybody. Let us see the questions. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am, for your excellent and enriching observation. We are delighted and honored to have you as
just a minute. Sorry. I forgot another point, the last one. I wish all the presenters to be successful in their academic careers and be research scholars in the true sense of the term. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Now this is the time for the interactive session. Participants have asked so many questions along with their appreciations, but as we are running late, we can take only a few questions. So the first question from Shushmita Mukherjee ma'am, our vice principal, for Riddhi Bhattacharya ma'am. Were the miniature painters depicting the romantic life of Nur Jahan and Emperor on their own, or was it patriarchal compulsion?
It was the paintings that I showed mostly came in the 18th and 19th centuries, and most of them were it was the demand of the time. It was due to, obviously, a lot due to the patriarchal compulsion, or else there were pictures of her hunting, which is only two. I found it, and only one picture, miniature, where she's wearing this dress with guns and all, like she's dressed like a man. But in most of them, it is the romance story which is more acceptable and more in demand, and her story is more associated with romance. So patriarchal compulsion definitely was at play.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question is for you also. It is from Swarnopali Chakraborty from Scottish Church College. Noor Jahan is the only empress who assumed pseudo power. Why wasn't similar step engraved for later empresses?
Actually, she didn't have pseudo power. She had de facto power. It is not pseudo. It is absolutely de facto power that she had. And she seized the power herself to some extent. And as her co-sovereign, her husband willingly sided with some powers when he found that she is extremely capable, and he tried to delve into, because for a long time he had waited to be emperor, and he in the Middle Ages he became the emperor, and then he was most interested in sciences and natural sciences and every other things. And so the mundane activities of administration is something that didn't fascinate him intellectually. So he left them to his wife, who was more than eager to fill up the vacuum, and he himself engaged in miniature paintings and other aesthetic duties, and especially for the curiosity of natural sciences. So he most of the time he did this. So it is, and later empresses didn't have that type of a supportive husband, somebody who could well believe in them. And by this time, patriarchal notions along with colonial experience had made the situation even more fierce for independent thinking on the part of women.
Thank you, ma'am. Next question is for Anirban Guhathakurata, sir. Arnab Odhikari, Department of History, Syamaprasad College, he had asked that, how does comics become a kind of writing?
Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. As I mentioned over there, that in case of comics, few people would argue that comics are multimodal in nature. When you see a page of comics, it's having various components. Normally, we associate the written text or the printed text and the image as the two inseparable kind of features. But comics can be mute, comics can be single paneled, comics can not even be without any sequence. So there are various variants of this entire thing. And more importantly, it demands a kind of a different sort of a critical literacy. Suppose why this becomes a writing. And when we are talking about historical narrativization in comics, think of, we all know the Holocaust story, but here you have in Spiegelman's Moss, you have a pictorial depiction of what actually dehumanization means. Now, if you watch if you have a sense of the Moss, in Moss, Jews appear as cats. I'm sorry, Jews appear as mouse, and the Germans would appear as cats, and the Polish would appear as pigs. So you have an actual visual indicator of what dehumanization or marginalization would mean. Now, in terms of writing, we have marks of accentuation done. We have marks of punctuation done. When you are viewing comics, you have words, you have images, you have variant fonts, you have panels, you have large panels, small panels, sometimes democratic panels. You have also even splash pages, all these things make up a different sort of a writing. And that might be dissimilar to the kind of a writing that we have normally in our cases. But definitely comics is a kind of a writing and may challenge various other modes of writing.
Acha. The next question is from Damini Roy. Does the graphic art in Amar Chitra Katha confirm some of the popular stereotypes and images of Indian women in history, such as when you spoke of the harem or in how historical women are visually represented?
Okay, as I was talking about the harem thing, now, if you go through the pages of Amar Chitra Katha, there is always that pink skinism available in the representation of beauty of the woman. There is always certain otherings available in the representation of othered women. I talked about the dresses. Think of Padmini and think of the other women in the harem. Now again, harem, that very term, or even polygamy, does occur when it is a hagiography, graphic hagiography of a Hindu ruler. Think of Bimbishar. Bimbishar appears in Amar Chitra Katha too, but there is hardly any mention of the wives. It, in a way, somewhere some stereotypes are sociologically framed, some are framed as virtues, and definitely that principle is available in Amar Chitra Katha to some extent, in fact, to a major level as well.
Our next question is for Bharvi Roy. Ma'am, how much is, it is actually this question is from me,
Okay.
how much is mysterious yet now about the real condition of women in 19th century, and what is the impact of Tarabai's writing on present era?
Tarabai's writing on present era, actually, if we think about Indian feminism, and we can actually divide Indian feminism into three phases. Okay, so Tarabai's writing was like, it was not at all well received at that time, and for 100 years the book was not published. It was published again after 100 years. So it was what to say, like, it was uh, because of those reaction, this, the only writing she had was this Stri Purush Tulna. And now we can all say that this is as much relevant as any other book in like depicting gender bias and all. So it is as much relevant as any book. This much I can say. Okay.
Another question is from Dr. Shomir Mondol, Assistant Professor in History, Government General Degree College, Muragacha. He is asking, when women are depressed by women themselves in home or in the platform of official work, how define that as a problem of patriarchy system?
This is the question, like, Riddhi.
This is a very
I think this is a question we have
high
heard.
question.
Yeah, this question we have heard almost in every
1,000
webinar. Yeah, exactly. Every webinar we attended about gender, about feminism, this question someone or other will ask. So the answer, I think, Riddhi will provide the answer. I think. Riddhi, please.
No,
Go
actually,
ahead.
there's this patriarchal notion that women are women's greatest enemies. Now, that is an
Yes.
extremely patriarchal notion, because human beings are human beings. So, enemies, a man can be a man's enemy, a man can be a woman's enemy. Similarly, a woman can be a woman's enemy, man. So, it doesn't matter. It's just a natural human reaction, and it doesn't matter whether it's a man or woman. So, for emotions, at least, that doesn't work like that. And there's ample example in history where there is sisterhood at work, comradeship and that companionship in which women are very good and doing work together. And as far as depression and all is concerned, now if a person is depressed and why he, or what is the question that why she is, what is that related to patriarchy? Now, depression can be due to many reasons. It can be due to questions like this. It can be due to other various problem. So it's just a temporary mental, or it can be severe mental problem also. But not to trivialize it or not to overly sympathize it, what I would like to say is that uh, it can be a result of patriarchy, because patriarchal mindset is so deep rooted that we are not aware of it. We just don't understand it at times because it has gone into our blood for anything.
Yes.
Like, so we don't know when what we are doing and why we are depressed, and men are also depressed, and there also patriarchy can be at can be the reason. So it's just a personal experience which you cannot just say due to patriarchy or not. So this is, I can't think about answering this like that.
Okay,
Exactly.
our next question is for Chandravali Dash. Otanu Dash, assistant teacher, he had asked that can increased representation of women in Lok Sabha decrease injustice to women?
Now, definitely yes. When it comes to political representation, it is a fact that if women are adequately represented in politics and the political institutions, then definitely the laws that are going to be passed in these institutions, particularly Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and I have also talked in my paper about the reservation of seats for women in the grassroots level governments, particularly panchayats and nagarpalikas. So, as more and more women will be inducted in these political institutions, naturally the laws that are going to be passed will be in favor of women empowerment, and definitely the position of women would improve.
Okay. Another question is from Pradeep Panda. Do you think that giving representation to women will solve the cultural echoes, and by doing so, male chauvinism will come to an end?
Now, when you talk about male chauvinism, male domination, these are questions these are the questions related to men's psychology. Now, unless and until you change your psychology, no matter however laws are passed, howsoever improvements and improvisations are done, and whatever is done, unless and until somebody's psychology changes, you can never change the culture. So, see, the males, their dominance and their intention of dominating women, not providing women with the right to freedom in decision making, these are actually something deep rooted in the main culture and main psyche. So, first of all, the men require to change their psyche, and then only institutions and other things of the society can help. But unless psychology changes, only merely implanting institutions or bringing in acts will not going to help.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next question is for Tina Basu. Our Vice Principal, ma'am, Shushmita Mukherjee. She has asked, did Bibha Chaudhuri leave India for the war, or was she victim of patriarchal domination? Why did they leave out her name? Was it because she was Bengali?
I don't think so, because unavailability of resources in India. It's a poor country after all, and colonized country. That's why she left, I think. And I don't think that she was a victim of patriarchal society, surely, but not because that she left India. This is my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Riddhi, ma'am, you have another question from Tita Shorkar. Why is that despite being a very visible co-emperor, Nur Jahan never recorded her achievements in writing?
actually, Noor Jahan has come from a background of Persian Shia culture, and there, there is this custom of writing couplets and shairi, sher, and poems. So she was more comfortable in that. Now, if you compare to her husband, Jahangir, coming from a Timurid background, where writing of memoir is something that is being taught, and it's expected that a king, that his father wrote, then Humayun couldn't write, but Gulbadan Begum, Humayun's sister, she wrote. So there is this culture of there. And her culture is, she's more at ease with writing poetry than often she wrote in the pen name. So, and she thought that this is her contribution to literature. So that is why maybe she didn't write a memoir or something autobiographical in nature, because her culture, her upbringing had encouraged her to write poetry. So that's what I have read.
Okay, ma'am. Chandramali ma'am, you have another question from Aminita Pal, University of Kullan. She said that yesterday I read a news stated that Hindu women and Muslim men's marriage is irregular, but their child is legitimate. So does not their woman's right to marriage is violate?
Can you please repeat the question? I couldn't understand the question actually.
Maybe she wants to know that a woman's right to marriage, about the woman's right to marriage she wants to know about, I
Hindu
think.
woman, Muslim men, there was some issue like this. So can you please explain
Yes,
that
yes.
portion of the question?
She said that yesterday I read a news stated that Hindu women and Muslim men's marriage is irregular, but their child ill, is legitimate. So does not their woman's right to marriage is violate?
Yes, actually, I think what she wanted to say is that marriage between a Hindu woman and a Muslim man is illegitimate. Now, this is not true. Actually, there is a provision, Special Marriage Act. If a Hindu girl thinks that she is going to marry a Muslim man, definitely under the Special Marriage Act, they can get their marriages registered, and there are lots of cases like this. So there is no question of any illegitimacy arising over a marriage between the two a Hindu girl and a Muslim man. And if the marriage is not illegitimate, so naturally the child which will be born out of this marriage, there is no question of his or her being illegitimate. And here I would like to add something, that even if they are not married, suppose a Hindu girl is living together with a Muslim man and they are having a child. In the eyes of society, maybe the child is illegitimate because an unwed mother has given birth to the child. But in the eyes of law, the child is very much legitimate, and she will or he will live by his or her mother's credentials and not father's. So not that this is illegitimate. The law is there to secure this type of marriages and children.
Thank you, ma'am. Otanu Dash has asked a question to Tina Basu ma'am. He wants to know why scientist Bibha Chaudhuri didn't get sufficient dignity for her work. I think you have already discussed this thing in your paper. Do you want to add anything, ma'am? Okay. So I am moving next to our last question for Anirban Guha Thakurata sir. Mithun Gayan has asked, is Amar Chitra Katha purely historical?
Now I come to, I guess, the greatest problem over here. Uh, you know, Nandini Chandra, Srinivas, Carlin MacLean, Pramod K. Nair, they all actually said that there is hardly any history in Amar Chitra Katha. In fact, Amar Chitra Katha is charged of this interpolation of history and mythology. too heroic to be historical. Now, it's fine. Somewhere down there, they have their own point of views. But in a way, even if it is mythological, don't can we completely de-recognize the history in it? Why do I say this? Think of Levi-Strauss. He found history as a perfect continuation of mythology. Um, there is this false binary always created that the ancient Indian society lacked historical sense, and other societies, European societies, did have historical sense. But somewhere, don't you think there is a complete disapproval of the fact that our Charitas, our Puranas, our Ramayana, Mahabharata, they being recognized as materials, resources of history, are de-recognized as history, and more importantly, can they not be seen as alternative modes of recording the past? So therein lies, in Amar Chitra Katha, there is a sufficient interpellation of the mythical, of the historical. But we cannot probably state, you may definitely challenge certain factualities presented over there. You can definitely challenge the narration, but you cannot probably de-recognize the value of the quote-unquote mythological in history. So there can be questions whether this is purely authentically history, whether they are all valid representations. But probably once they have said that this is history, let's recognize that to be history first, and then challenge the authenticity, challenge the validity of things. But let's not get into that very Eurocentric notion of history and it being the only way to look at the past.
Thank you to all the speakers for answering so many questions and staying with us so long. And this is really a brainstorming session. And I want to thank our participants for asking so many engaging questions. Uh, this evening, you have all made this evening so exciting and enjoyable. Now I request our Vice Principal Ma'am to say a few words as we have reached at the end of our today's session. Ma'am.
Thank you, Shilogna. Uh, Firstly, I would like to thank Korobi, my dear friend, for sharing her views and perceptions on the concept of feminism, its challenges and issues. You have very nicely explained it, and we have been enriched by your illuminating introduction. I thank all the presenters for their wonderful papers. And it's very interesting because the papers ranged from actually Nur Jahan to Amar Chitra Katha to empowered women, and also the path to empowerment. Even we were shown that how empowered we are and how we actually don't use it. We should use it for our betterment. We actually forget that we are actually empowered by the Constitution and by Supreme Court. And it's extremely brainstorming. And what I liked about is that so many questions have come up and so many new ideas have come up. And I'm sure that those who are hearing, the young students, young scholars, they will find new ways of research, new topics of research. That is very important. And actually, that is the main intention of our two-day seminar. We want to make people think about the new researches that are going on so that the young generation can work on it. And I'm sure that we have been successful in our mission. And today was the first day of the two-day long seminar. So first day comes to an end here. And our next, tomorrow we will again meet at 3. But before I leave, I would invite my chairperson and all the paper presenters and everyone everyone present here to join us tomorrow again and make our webinar a success. Thank you so much for your kind participation today. I'm really, really indebted to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Thank you.
Participants.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Participants, I have.
Thank you. It was very interesting and very nice. I really enjoyed it. And I thank so much for chairing the session and for sharing her views. It's really a great, enriching session for all of us.
Thank you, our technical team also.
Yes, definitely. Technical team, even Shulogna, my entire history department, all my teachers, everyone has contributed to make this a success. Thank you so much.
I have a notice for the participants in our YouTube chat box. Participants, you are requested to fill the attendance form. You will get another attendance form. E-certificate will be given to those who attend the webinar both the days and submit both these forms. Thank you. So we are ending today's session here. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
সরি আমি ইন্টারনেটটা কেটে গেছিল
Thank you. Thank you, Chandravali ma'am. Thank you, Anirban sir, Tina ma'am, Bharvi ma'am.
Welcome.
আজকের মতো তাহলে এখানেই শেষ করছি।
আচ্ছা, কালকে কি তাহলে আমরা ইউটিউবে শুনবো? আমরা যারা মানে জাস্ট পার্টিসিপেট করছি, মানে প্রেজেন্টার নই, জাস্ট পার্টিসিপেন্ট, আমরা ইউটিউব লিংকে ক্লিক করব।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ ম্যাম, আমরা